get us started on our workshop. Welcome, Tim. Corey, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Welcome, School Board of Director members. We have excused absences for Director Iniguez and Director Belton. But we know that they'll be watching the presentation of this at their own time, their own convenience. But I'm really excited that we have Tim Shepard with us today, our Director of State and Federal Programs. Tim is in his second year of working here at the district office on this program, and I love the relationships that he had as he came into the position, but also those that he's nurtured since as well, working with every single building in some capacity. The interesting thing at the end of his first year was when we kind of learned that there may be some troubles down the road with regard to federal funding, and we all spent an interesting July working through what that might look like if the funding were not to go through. I remember a couple of phone calls with Tim he was on vacation and we were coordinating when his excursions might be over and we could have a Zoom meeting with him. So it's like lots of fun. But what we had talked about during that experience, I think in July, is making sure, one, that we are transparent with all of the information that we have and know with not only the school board, but our community. And then just to kind of talk generally about everything state and federal programs. It's been a while since we've all gotten kind of a primer, so to speak, in what those programs are, who they impact, and what might happen if they were not to exist. So here Tim is today to talk us through that. Tim, thank you for joining us and thank you for your expertise in state and federal program lingo. It looks like we have a lingo guide here, and I'll turn it over to you, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, so the lingo guide is there. There's a lot in federal and state programs with a lot of acronyms and a lot of things that you wouldn't know just off the top of your head, probably. So this is just a guide that divides it between federal and state programs. So you have that as we're going through the presentation just to refer back to so that you have an idea of what we're talking about here. So today I wanted to talk about state and federal programs from a standpoint of unlocking those federal and state programs to support student success. And it's so how federal and state programs differ, but also how they work together. So that's what we're gonna get into today. Oops. Boy, it went far. Okay, so why does this matter? First of all, Washington schools receive both federal and state programs, which you probably knew. Each program has unique requirements, but a shared goal, which is student success. And then the braiding the funds allows student to coordinate resources effectively. So I don't know of a school district that's not braiding funding in some way or another since that started. So what is braiding funding? Just exactly what it is. What does it do? It empowers districts to maximize funding impact. It shows how funds can be used independently and together. It aligns with the ESSA, or the Every Student Succeeds Acts, and also the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So the acts, those federal acts. And what it does is encourage data-driven, locally informed decisions. So you could sort of caught a glimpse of this when I was doing my last presentation, but this gets into more of the different funds and how they work together. Braiding funds.
Tim, just maybe this is the next. It seems like the braiding funds allows you to have different positions funded by, as opposed to like this one thing is what this one person does. Is that kind of the gist of what braiding does?
So there's a lot of us that have different funding and a lot of staff between different special programs. So it allows flexibility in who you work with in schools as well. Yeah.
Can I just jump on that one quickly? Because my assumption is that once you braid, you also create a reporting obligation that you have to demonstrate that those funds were proportionately used for those purposes. Is that correct?
Yes. So if anything that uses federal funding you have to do a time and effort for it. If it's state funded, no. But if you combine the two, you have to for any federal funding, through time and effort. Yeah, for the staffing component. So braiding funds is just like it is. It's funding, using multiple funding sources for one initiative while keeping their different identities. The benefits, it reduces duplication, improves consistency, and focuses on shared goals. And then one example would be combining Title I, Title IV, and LAP for reading interventions during and outside of the school day. The different funding sources each help fund a part of that program. So here's an overview. I just wanted to give you an overview of federal and then of state. So in federal programs, we have Title I Part A, which is all about achieving the closing the achievement gaps. Title I-C is migrant student support. Title II Part A is professional learning for teachers and leaders. Title III Part A is for language instruction for English learners. Oh, am I done? No. Thank you, Kim. No. Title IV is student support and academic success. Title IX is McKinney-Vento homeless support. And then IDEA Part B, that's special education funding. So the only one of those that I don't help manage is the special education. So all those other ones are a part of my purview. And we connect some of them together more than others, and you'll sort of see that as we go along. So that's all the federal programs.
Tim, just a quick question on those.
Yep.
One of the things that I think maybe no one else is thinking about, but just on the most granular level, is there a Title I Part B that we just don't talk about?
There are
Okay.
several other programs that we don't take advantage of
Okay.
at the district or are not qualified for.
Perfect, that helps me, because I think
Yeah.
of Title
Where's all
IV
the
to
others?
Title IX, all
Yeah.
things, okay.
Yeah,
So
so
those
I'm
are-
I'm not going into anything that we don't work with here at the district.
Perfect, thank you.
Because it would take me another hour and a half, I think, to do that. So, right, what I wanted to do with this next slide is you're seeing most all of the federal programs. All of those that are in that box there are called a consolidated grant. ESEA is the old ESSA, the act. And they haven't changed that, which is surprising. But this consolidated grant is all one grant that you do at one time in one consolidated grant. So it has Title I-A, Title I-C, 2, 3, and 4. So all of those are one. And the interesting part about working through this grant, this consolidated grant, is they're often connected. So one thing you put in one part of the grant is connected to another part of the grant, and they have to match or work together or it won't let you submit them. So my first year was very interesting. I did pretty good with it. I was pretty proud of myself. But now I see it so much more clearly as a second year, not knowing everything, but a lot better. So that's all one grant that comes together. I also wanted to touch on with federal program, this is where we have our uncertain funding sources. So you'll see some of them are not still included. Title I-A, I don't feel like we're in fear of losing Title I-A. But Title I Part C, that's one that we were, that was threatened that we wouldn't have this last year. So you can see those two numbers there. The first 1.1 million is our allocation for this year. The 1.3 million is carry forward, which we could possibly get in January, February. So we're talking, 2.4 plus, that if they don't fund it at all, we could lose that migrant funding. Title II, which is for professional learning for teachers and leaders, that was another one that they said we might lose some or all. And so that our allocation this year was 245,846. And we should have some carryover from this last year of 143,000. Title III, same thing for language instruction for English learners. So again, that's just to support language development, is 201,788, and then possibly a 90,000 here. And then in Title IV, which is sort of really a catch-all, but it really is to diversify how we can support students and their academic enrichment. So 146,579 plus 97,000. all of those up that are listed there, let me think real quickly, you have 100% carry forward. So it's just good to know. In Title 1A, you only normally get to carry over 15%. So regardless of what you have left, 15% is the max they'll let you carry forward. All these other ones are 100% carry forward.
So that means that anything we don't use this year, we'll carry forward to next year.
Yes.
We believe.
Yes, if it's still,
Right.
yeah, if they'll still be allowing it.
And is it school year or calendar year?
It is school year. It goes from September to August.
August. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
But there's a long lag in there before you know where it's coming, what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, because and then they don't say carry forward. It's supposed to be early January. This last year it was end of February, just because of everything that was going on. I also wanted to talk about Title IX. It's not a part of the consolidated grant, but just to give you an idea of what's happening in that department, I did it in blue because it is a competitive grant. All the other ones are allocations that you automatically get because of the numbers of kids, you're free and reduced, you know, all those things that go into that. But last year, we got $67,000. This year we got zero. So because of all that money's going away with all the COVID dollars, it then became, and everybody had those COVID dollars. Well, all of a sudden that went away. And so people were really trying to get some extra funds to help with homeless. And so we applied for this one and did not get it. And then there's one more state one that we did get, and I'll share with that in a minute. So that's a big deal because we can't live off of the one grant that we got. It's not even a third of our salary for our one person that we have. So I'll explain that in a little bit. And then special education, when things were first going on last year, this isn't my department, but I do know that there was a threat of, there wasn't so much of a talk around special education being reduced. Well, when we came back at the start of the year, that was part of the conversation. So again, I don't follow that one as closely, but special education is one that it's also on the table.
Corey, would that be Shane Rennie? Is that who would
Yeah.
manage that?
Yeah,
We,
unless you've heard something different.
well, we
or-
did just receive our apportionment funding last week for this school year, so we are feeling good about that part. There are still some things that are up in the air though, so it was quite a little celebration
Yeah.
via email. That we were able to get that funding last week, so that's a good spot. Still moving forward, just like the uncertainty, I think that it's anything that's on the table, we are taking very seriously and planning in advance for those.
Yeah. So now getting to the state funds. So we have LAP, which supports students not yet meeting standards. TBIP, which is for language development for our English learners. You have HCP, which is highly capable. So that's for advanced learning for highly capable students. Then you have BEST and TPEP. BEST is for beginning educator. And TPEP is the teacher and principal growth and evaluation grants. And both of those work together for supporting teacher mentoring and evaluation. And then you have the HSSEP, which is Homeless Student Stability Education Program, which is the state side of it. So this year we got 35,200. Last year we got 50,797. So we had a drastic cut as far as homeless. And to remedy that for this year, I took in your Title 1A, you have some required set-asides that you have to put aside. One of those is for homeless. But I contributed $100,000 out of our title for homeless. But you soon keep on doing that for all the other programs, you're going to run out of title to do what it's supposed to do. So this year I felt comfortable doing that. Not sure moving forward without some careful study of where we're at with things.
We also took advantage of, we used to have 1.5 FTE in our McKinney-Vento or homeless program, but we had resignation, and so we held on to that and did not fill that position as well because we knew that this was happening. So,
Yeah.
but then still, Tim ended up short, even for the one position that we did have.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like I said, it was not even a third of just one salary. So, so all the state programs are designed to complement and extend the federal initiatives. So those are all, that's state programs.
So does that mean that as we look at those federal fundings kind of expiring, does that mean those state funded are going to be really, they're there to support, they're not there to complement.
Complement.
They're not there to support, as in like all these staff members are that have 75% federal funding and 25% state, that staff member can't survive on that 25%, or the district can't keep paying them a full
Correct.
salary for that.
Yeah, that's just one example of one person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
and Tim, another clarification on that last slide, was the homeless student stability education program, was that the only competitive one?
No, they're both competitive. What am I doing? I'm going forward instead of backwards. Yeah, so that, again, that's in blue because it is
It is
competitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Those are really the only competitive ones that are directly aligned with
Okay.
state and social programs. There are other grants we do that are, our 21st century grant, which is a federal.
Okay, thank you.
Not really getting into that too much today, but I do work really closely with 21st century grants. I assign all the building authorities and those types of things. And last year we did fund some out of homeless and not homeless, out of Title I and Title I and Title migrant. So we had enough migrant students where we could cross fund.
That's right. That was for after school or also for homeless?
That was for the 21st century grant. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. This year, because we got the new grant, then we are still funding a few things out of migrant, but it's much, much less. Yeah. So, which was good. We were hoping that's what would happen as we moved into this year, because it does so much for our district. So how do they differ? Well, how they're the oversight, the US Department of Education oversees all of the federal dollars through the state. And again, it's a national equity focus. The state, it's Washington legislature and OSBI oversight. And that really goes to the local priority focus. Federal accountability is through the acts, the ESSA Act, which is the latest. And the state is through the OSPI systems. But state programs can adapt more quickly for emerging needs. And so that's why it's important that we have a combination of those two and how they complement each other. How they work together? Well, here's an example. So looking again at that reading initiative intervention. So Title I funds, it's for the reading intervention teachers. LAP funds are used for the assessments and progress monitoring components of it. Title IV provides tutoring for at-risk students, and it's called tutoring because it's before and after the school day. So it is supplemental, it's extra, but it also pays for the staffing that goes along with that. And then when we have our ML students, which we have a lot of in this district, then we can use Title III funds for that ELL focused professional learning. So anything that deals with language development, we can use our Title III funds. So the outcome again is improved literacy and equity across the student groups. And so that's the whole goal, is to really blend the two so that we can have equity for our students that have greater challenges and less to work with. It also, I think, is important to talk about MTSS, so that collaboration framework that's integrated into all state and federal programming. So it integrates the academic, the behavioral, and the social emotional support. So here's some examples of that. So in tier one, that core instruction, we could use Title IV and highly capable. In that tier two, around the targeted interventions, we would use LAP and Title I. And then for that more intensive support, more of that supplemental, we would look at the special education IDEA and the TBIP for the specific needs of kids that might need that extra support. So again, but as you're, every kid is in every tier. So you're trying to figure out which ones to use in which part of their support system that they need. And that's why it's so important that you don't just look at tier two and tier three, that you focus on tier one as well as, are you being successful with your core intervention? And how are you using funds though to make sure that's happening? So like Title IV, again, it's just that well-rounded education, and that the highly capable is a part of that program at the core level as well. Professional learning is a big part of special programs. And so professional learning is a part of that, because we all know that in order to have effective instruction, you have to have effective instructors. So how do we support professional learning? Title II helps us with coaching and leadership development. Our LAP makes sure that we have data-informed intervention professional development. So do our teachers know how to use the data that they have and how to plan interventions? Our Best in TPEP is an important part of mentoring and our evaluation systems. And then again, Title III would be that ELL specific instructional PD. And I think what I'm most proud of is the way that we're using our Title III funds, really as getting to our core right now, because we know how vital core instruction is, and we know how many of our kids are struggling. And so we want to make sure that we're incorporating those things in Title III, those language development components that all of our kids need as a foundation. And then we do other things that are more specific around designated supports, is what we call that, for to ensure that our ML learners have time to further develop their language throughout the day, as well as before and after school occasionally. So the whole goal really is to create a cohesive professional learning ecosystem that sort of indicates where we're at as a system, and then as a building, and then as an individual teacher or even grade level, and then what kind of PD do we provide across the year to help us grow in that same capacity. So outcomes and takeaways, federal funds ensure equity and compliance. State funds support flexibility and local alignment. Grading ensures efficient student-centered use of resources. And the results are stronger literacy, better teacher capacity, and an improved climate. And that's where you really get into that MTSS system as being an important part of this. It covers all academic and non-academic areas, because we know how important the climate is to learning, not only for the teachers, but also for the students. So just sort of a quick closing message: when federal and state programs work together, they transform funding silos into systems of support. It encourages needs assessments, which you heard about at my last presentation, around school improvement, collaboration, and ongoing monitoring. And I think that's been my biggest goal as I've been in this. I used all these funds and programs as a building administrator for 19 years. And so to come into this position and try and integrate them together as efficiently as we can is what I really want to do. And so we've been meeting, started last year, meeting at all these different departments that run these different grant programs, meeting together on a weekly basis so that we can have thought partners and making sure that we're all on the same line, and even our professional development that we're providing, even though it can be different for the different programs, there's a lot that can be the same. And that's through high levels of successful tier one instruction. Any questions so far?
So it seems like the magic you bring is trying to get this to work across the system, right? Like it's not, I was just thinking about like the braiding means that you can have, it may pay for one FTE overall, but you need that funding to be spread across the whole district.
Right,
So that's why it's not necessarily that it wouldn't be easier to just say this one person is this one thing from this one grant.
right,
It's that you have to have that program support a tenth of a person in 10 buildings.
yeah,
Is that kind of
Yes.
the gist? So it's like, that's where the braiding really comes in, is that it's funding the whole district, not like, when you're at Lincoln, how do I fund my building?
right. Yeah, and it's especially important as you start thinking about intervention, which is a big part of, all the funds, including special education. Because they each have their specific rules around it, you can only use certain funds for certain kids at certain levels. So if you say, if I have, 5 intervention specialists, whatever that name, that one, if you only funded them out of one pot, they couldn't meet all the needs of all kids. So while it makes it a big headache at the building level, we've all done it, going to cross-fund people so that you can have a wide variety of students even working in the same group, because the instructor or the paraeducator is funded out of several funds, and it opens up to be able to serve more diverse needs of kids at a higher level.
And so they're not required to say, I saw like Susie, Johnny, and Billy, and this funds go to that Susie, these funds go to Billy, these funds go to Johnny, because they are able to see everyone because they're being funded by these different things. And you can leave it there, or
All except in migrant.
okay,
In migrant, you actually have to say what students you worked with.
okay. And if it was like a walk to learn situation where you have 15 people and that one of those students is in that group, would you be able to put those funds there, or is it more like one-to-one intervention? Maybe I'm in the weeds, Bob.
For a migrant, it's more one-to-one,
Okay.
yeah. But the other is pretty flexible.
It's flexible. It's flexible once you're braided.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do it without it being braided.
Right.
Yeah, and get to the level of intervention that we have right now, which is even much different than when I started 19 years ago, because we didn't do a lot of braided funding.
So then for PD, you're doing that, is that paying like, and I'm a little bit fuzzy on all this, so like timesheet time, or is it more like actually paying the trainers that are gonna come in and teach to that, whatever the migrant learning, or like bilingual support, or
Yes.
is it paying all the things?
All those things.
Sometimes when we are coordinating and planning professional development, it's the full day where we don't have students in buildings, and we take October 10th, for example, we have that full day. There's those situations, or then we have situations where we'll have smaller groups that we will take during a regular school day, and they'll have substitute teachers while they do training here. And then they have afternoon situations where we're time sheeting them to come in after hours to get that additional work. So all of the things you mentioned, it's quite a behemoth.
Yeah, so everybody that's involved has some sort of professional development that is more specific to the program that they're being funded under. And then because we're focusing on language development and all of our general PD, our PD plan that we have for the year, our trainers work together. We have some ML funded, we have some Title App funded, and then even migrant, depending on how they fit into it. Migrant's a little different, but we are working at incorporating more migrant educational time during the day. It's not mostly, it's very little supplemental education. It's more services, but we're really trying to get to more of the education support during the day. But it's hard because you only have so much time during the day. And so it's difficult to figure out when, and the principals will say, well, yeah, I would like even an extra hour a day, but when am I going to do that? So you're not pulling them from core, which is, that's something we don't.
In a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. So say worst case happens and we do lose some of the federal funding. We don't lose the students themselves, but our programs that we offer them would suffer. So does that become, do we just stop offering the program, or are we now in a situation where we're trying to use our general fund to recreate these programs on our own funding?
I think so. I think that would be the goal, is to keep as much as we can. Knowing the value of those different programs for those families. And so, that's what we're already sort of looking at right now. I'm trying to, I just got my last grant funded yesterday. And so now I can start moving on and working more with Corey and the cabinet around what it might look like. And we're all anxiously waiting to get any idea of what they're thinking.
One of the things that we have to kind of think about, and why Tim put that up there, is the carry forward piece. Because if funding were to be cut for future programming and we were able to keep the carry forward, we could have smaller programming, but keep it going for a couple of years and help support that work. And so we're really anxious to find out exactly what happens to the funding and what pieces we get to keep. So we have plans either way. Some of the exercises that we went through this summer to help prepare for what could have been the worst earlier this year. We dusted one of those spreadsheets off this morning just in case. We need to make sure that this is what's happening. And one of the bright spots in dusting that spreadsheet off was we are preparing our system for the worst, even if it weren't to come. And so a few of those positions that we had laid out, they have already been resigned, and people have already resigned those positions, and we didn't fill them, just to make sure that we're doing the best that we can in this planning year, so that we're as prepared as we can be for what we don't know to expect.
It's a great question.
Yeah. It seems to me that you have to work, or we have to work, in 3 dimensions simultaneously. The first one being what you think would be the best delivery of education across all needs, and that's in your hands. Then the original allocation of funds comes with restrictions on what you're permitted to use it for. So if there's a conflict between what you thought was the highest priority and what the funds are authorized for, you can't breach the authorization, so you've got to adapt to that. And the third one behind that is, at the end of it, you've got to justify what you did and report back to the grants. So you're working in 3 very complicated, not necessarily compatible dimensions, right?
Right. And it's getting, I have a whole year to rely on as far as history, but the reporting is getting tighter. So they want more detail. They want more evidence of how you used it. And as the grants that are competitive become higher sought after, then they're expecting differences as well as how you're going to use it. So yeah, and it's a lot to juggle. You're exactly right. It's 3 dimensions and it never stops. Yeah.
Right. And I guess what I missed is, you can't necessarily fill a vacuum of need if there is no fund allocated from outside for that particular need.
Right.
Then you've just got a vacuum.
Yep.
Is there any way, it seems like carryover is that's the big uncertainty, because you can bank on it and the rules might just change.
Right.
Is there any way to say, okay, we're gonna fund, and this is, this could be like insane, but could you fund instead of 0.1, 0.2, and then save money in the general fund? Like we're not paying the teacher salary out of, and again, I don't know how this works, but like, it seems like the district's paying staff and some from the levy. And then is there a way to like bank that money and then use the federal funds more aggressively in this year, knowing that then we're saving money for the district so that we could potentially push it out that way? Or is that, again, the allocation and the numbers just not going to work?
No, that's the kind of thinking that's the level of thinking that we need to be working at. And we have thought a lot about that and have done some of those, made some of those decisions that are, and I think both levy funds and what we refer to as basic education allocation, BEA funds, that is exactly what we did this summer in some of our planning. And that was also part of the conversation with the carryover piece. So even if we have the carryover piece, how do we like nurture that for as long as we possibly can with the combination of DEA and levy dollars as well too. So we did some of that work. I will definitely say we didn't exhaust it.
Yeah.
But it's also the same funding, I guess not, it's not game, but I guess just it's balancing. We do the same with our career and technical education funds as well. And so we can have the most maximum reach about rating those funds and then saving what we can for future time. Because we need to use that, and how can that impact our fund balance, and then we can still make greater gains over time. So yeah, that was beautiful.
But no, I've worked with like the use it or lose it funding for, you see like, what can we buy this year that we don't have to buy
Yeah.
next year, and we move that money differently. So it seems like we're in that situation where it'd be nice if we just said, this money is yours until you use it, but we're not really in that situation,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And I think it's important to remember here too, that federal funding, there's carry forward. State funding, there's no carry forward. So you either spend it or you lose it. So sort of a reverse of what you were talking about for this year, we had some state funding that we wanted to use the maximum capacity of in order to get our full allocation for this 25-26 year. So I did some shifting around of staff funding in order to maximize that. And I felt pretty proud about that work and what we did. It saved us, I don't even remember how much, Corey, do you have any idea? Was it 500,000 or not even that? I don't remember.
I think it was in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And it was like, how do we do this in July so that it impacts the 24-25 budget, so that we do have extra fund balance at the end of it while we have those dollars.
Yeah, and it's a real dance, because yeah, you have to get it done, you have to do it by a certain time, but then you can't wrap up your books to get into the next year until those are through. And you can't plan if you don't know your balances either. So it's like, do we really? Well, yeah, we need to do it this year to ensure that we could that we got as high an allocation as we can in all state funding. So, but we got through it and it worked out nicely, I think.
What I like hearing in that is that you're not using the use it or lose it funds to drastically increase a program benefit that we can't then continue to offer. Instead, it's the opposite. You're trying to offer this as long as you want. Almost the opposite way that the COVID funds worked, where you were just given a bunch of money to staff all these positions, but knowing that in the future you couldn't sustain them and they were all going to fall out of the system. So it sounds like we're sort of doing the opposite this time, not filling positions we could, and instead pushing grant funding to positions we want to last longer in the future. Yeah,
and that's a hard pill for people to understand, or staff to say, we had all this money all this time. Why all of a sudden are we having to cut all these funds? And especially like migrant, they were going to cut it all together. Well, that's my largest department right now, because we have the most funds through it. So it's all of those components. And so, yeah, we're not hiring new migrant staff in a continuing fashion. We have some extra this year because we know we do. So that's, trying to increase that 1 hour of para time per day per building. But it's a non-continuing contract. So it doesn't stick us with something that we can't carry forward and have to cut people, because that's not fun for anyone.
How much are staff aware of this? Like, do they know here's your graded funding, or is it more like the district's going to pay me, and then the building administrator or the district office has to manage this specifically where the money is coming from to write that check for the paycheck?
Administrators understand that, because we work together on funding. They'll suggest some things and then we'll work on it together to make sure I'm balanced on my end. And so that gives them some meat in the game at their building level. Staff, special program staff know it because they all know they're multiple funded, but it's a hard concept to really capture without getting into the thick of it. But what they hear and see is we don't have the funds anymore. And so I think we've been careful in trying to communicate that, and I know that we're anxious to communicate out, with the trainers, but those positions that are very dependent on all, migrant or state and federal programs. But we just don't know yet.
Yeah, human resources did some communication with people, and if you're receiving this notification, then you are funded in some way, shape, or form by the title dollars that could be subject to federal cuts in the future. We just want to make sure that you're aware of that and understand that, and want to make sure we get ahead of that conversation. So we did that in the before school started, and we did it also once in September. And then the goal is we have the spreadsheet. We have a list of folks that we need to talk to throughout this year once we have an idea of what next year brings. And we'll be having those conversations at the individual building level. So that'll be good.
Yeah, it just, it seems like it's so ever changing and like such a complicated little web of funding that it's like for an individual to know how they're funded, especially year to year, is kind of effort maybe not well spent. So it makes sense.
Right.
I just,
Yeah,
it's like a
absolutely.
level of stress that I would personally wouldn't want to carry around, but
Yeah.
like people are pretty savvy when it comes to their jobs.
Sure.
Tim still has another section of his presentation today, more of a problem of practice.
So parent and family engagement, despite our federal and state programs designed to support student engagement, our district struggles to consistently involve families, especially historically underserved populations, in meaningful ways that impact student learning. Parent and family student engagement is included component of all state and federal program requirements in some way or another. Well, why? Well, because we know how key it is to student learning success. And I think we talked about that a little bit when we were talking about our LCAP. So parent and family and student engagement makes a difference. And so why is it important to you as the school board? I think it's important for the school board to understand the challenge and to champion any needed changes that we need in this area. Parent and family engagement attendance is a current focus of our LCAP, and all of our building SIP plans have included a component of that. And then it's important to get feedback and input from all of our stakeholders at all levels. So that's you too. So we want to make sure and do that. So as you might have heard or know, the challenges are really around just one-way communication. We rely on newsletters, and it says smalls dominate, emails dominate. So it's limited dialogue, just one-way communication. Barriers for underserved families, the language, the work, the schedules, the technology gaps, the low participation. Funding underutilization, program funds not strategically applied to engagement initiatives. That's one thing I'm really working on this year. And then just measuring an impact, the lack of systematic tracking, unclear link to student outcomes. And that's something else that I'm also working on this. How do we use programs to support engagement and make it an important part of the schools and districts business, but then how do we know it's making a difference? So that's something else that, and that's a difficult one. You're dealing with how is parent and family engagement influencing learning outcomes? It's all about learning. So how do we look at both of those elements to see if we're doing the best that we can? So that's something I'm working on. So we have all those challenges. And so I just like to know, well, so our outcomes for this is the district-wide, we want district-wide sustainable family engagement practices. We want increase in measurable family participation. We want reduced disparities in engagement for our underserved families, and then improve student outcomes linked to parent and family involvement. So how do we do that, I guess, is the question. So just some guiding questions that I'd like to talk with you all about is, what have you observed or heard in your role that might help us all better understand this challenge? this whole challenge around family and parent engagement. What tools or strategies can measure engagement impact on student outcomes? How do we ensure that equitable access for historically underserved families? And how can funding be used to strategically remove barriers and increase engagement?
Those are really good questions, Tim.
Just little ones.
Really good.
Yeah, so I just really am interested in what you know, in your role here, what around these ideas, what are you hearing and seeing from our parents and families? What other measures have you seen that we might use that we're not right now?
I think for a little context here as well is these are questions that I think our building leaders grapple with, every single day, especially when it comes to and perennially when they plan their school improvement plans as well. And then Tim has, now in his second year as state and federal program director, we have lots of these. We have lots of reporting that we have to do where we are feeling not satisfied in the outcomes that we're getting with parent and family engagement. And I am excited about the work that Tim is doing around that and the work that he is helping guide in the district as that trickles down to the school improvement plans as well. So just a little context here.
I think during the Columbia closure process, I was amazed at how many people said, you're not listening to us. Like I want, and I went to the PTO meeting and it was a lot of like, they want the Q&A, right? A public comment without a response doesn't feel like we're missing each other. Right. And so like that kind of town hall type situation where I have a question, I have a concern, and someone says something back to me. And I think that felt like a lot of what people felt like was missing from the district was a response back specifically to their concerns, or that there was some kind of dialogue. And so like I said, when I went actually to the PTO meeting and they're saying, you responded, and now we're going to go back and forth. And even to the point where, there's some teachers like, hey, so how are you feeling when we're giving these public comments? I'm like, well, it kind of seems like you're totally attacking us. Like, oh, that wasn't our intent. I'm like, well, okay. But, but that's when someone can then soften their tone or like say like, I want this to be constructive. It might not feel constructive now.
Yeah.
So, I think what I've heard is that how do you get that back and forth?
Yeah.
Because like I said, that one-way communication was tough.
And it's usually us to them.
Yep.
And so interesting that when we invite them to us, they want a response. They want that two-way communication. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the piece that I see as hard is how do we get them to even show up for those meetings? I mean, that was a unique group where you had families that were actively engaged and involved already, but how do we reach the families who aren't actively engaged or don't know how? I mean, we get invites all the time of come to this, event at the school, and that's bringing them to us. How do we push ourselves out there to them? And part of me is thinking, do we know some of these families? Is there a large employer that is an employer of all these families that maybe we can pass information to the employer saying, hey, distribute this to your employees? I don't know how we get it more in their hands to communicate, because that's the hard part is we can put out there and host all the meetings we want. It's how do we get them to come in so that we can have those conversations?
I think Julie's comment hits the heart of what I think. And what I think is that I don't have any answers, and I'm not sure that we do really, but PTO meetings and people coming to public citizen comment, I think that's the wrong audience. It's the people who aren't coming. And if you go to parent group meetings, you'll find people struggling to get their fellow parents to come and take an interest. So I think that's where you have to work every single corner you can. I think this is not an answer. This is just like thinking about how would everybody address it. Yeah. And when you sit inside some of those meetings, you listen to people saying, well, how come we didn't get anybody? I don't have an answer to that, but that's one interface between the group of parents who come and the group of parents who aren't getting the communication. Now, something I've found in trying to learn what people think, just not really what you're talking about, is if you take older students, say from 8th grade upwards, they understand the power of their parents, I think, better than their parents do. Now, it's an absolute no-no to use a child as a translator, and you're not going to do that. But I feel that children are very powerful ways of, if there is a way that you can get a message from children or a behavior from children that creates a sense of entitlement. We have parent-teacher conferences. You know, what's the attendance of that? But not just only what's the attendance, but what's the level of search of, call it aggression, from the point of view of the parents. Nice aggression, good aggression. And how do you get that? Or get them to ask a question. And then if you're hosting music or athletic or other functions at the schools, I know you do everything and we do everything, but who is coming and who isn't? I went to an opening day at one school, and I was told I was off base by saying that. I noticed that I thought the distribution of parents wasn't super representative. And I asked the question, well, you know, did we provide transport to go to certain places? And then the other big thing is our work hours. Yeah. Many of the underrepresented communities, they have more restrictions. And many of the funded boards have an ability to pay people for compensation for losing work, or actually write letters back to the employer saying, you know, this is why your employee didn't come, because they're doing this important job on a board. And those things exist and are necessary. So as I say, this is a whole bunch of non-solutions, but things that we're aware of. And I love the fact that you address these in this way. And it's just a mindset, getting onto it, and maybe just an inch at a time, millimeter at a time. Yeah. But I do think that if we focus on somehow, and I'm going to use the behavior around the student that can somehow look tempting and exciting to parents. And then I've seen parents pull their hair out and say, I can't get my other parents to come. So I'm not sure, that seems to be a tougher route to go. But so if I were trying to scratching my head and working every corner, I think of things where the parents can get, the children can get enthusiasm into their parents.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say incentivize them, but how do we incentivize the parent or the students, especially the older ones, to get their family to either come to something or to even pick up the phone? Maybe we start making more offers in terms of, hey, if this, you know, you student, communicate with your family. If this doesn't work, we'll call you, or we'll call your parents at particular times, or yeah, something like that. Just, and then what are the incentives to the students to get that information? I mean, I like I said, I hate to use the carrot and the stick approach, but sometimes that may be what it needs. What do they have to gain from this?
I want to say that there are some great programs and great efforts where you see things working, but it's a part of the playing field. So I don't want what I said to come across as if it isn't happening. It's happening on part of the playing field, and maybe those are clues. And Julie, the idea of the carrot and the stick, I guess I can say this. I really liked the presentations on attendance at the last family night. Yeah. And my impression was that they were well received. Both the explanation of how your child's failure to attend isn't just your child's problem, it's everybody's problem, has the other children in the classroom as well, and a sense of social responsibility. But then I've got to say is what percentage of the community actually got that message? And that's what you're working. You're getting small communities, you're getting a small fraction of the group. How do you widen that? And I'm going to repeat myself. I don't have an answer, but I think when you're looking at those areas, you're looking in the right areas.
And I would say, you know, with the district's big push on attendance right now, Martin brought the point that you're not getting people at like the PTA meetings, you know, like how do we get the people? And there's all those barriers. But man, I sure see the people at the events, you know, I have a kid at Washington, and we had Fall Festival, yeah, and we couldn't get anyone during that same time frame to go to a PTA meeting, but then we had 150 people, 150 students and their families. So, you know, probably 200 to 300 people total at this event that's happening at that same time. So, you know, you talk about like the stick or the carrot, like how do you meet them where they are, which is they're at your school during these fun events that the PTA is funding. Like how, you know, at what point can you reach them while they're there?
Yeah.
And something I'm sure you already do. I've had the experience as a parent of just being amazed at how teachers would respond to family questions, at using their own time exceptionally. But ask the teachers if where and how they get most responsiveness. And you obviously they are limited in their time, but maybe you'll find examples of there are places where you have success and activity. Can those be learned from and transferred to other places? But another forum other than the for contact is actually teachers themselves probably are aware of what's going on with their students and how that works. And I don't know about the family advocates.
Yeah, I think one of the issues I see being a problem is the same conversation we've had about CTE is some families, maybe because they didn't have parents that went to college and have just worked their whole life, don't see school as being all that important.
Yeah.
And they just assume that, you know, their kids going here because they're required to, but when they're done with school, there's no expected future. They're just going to go, you know, do the jobs that mom and dad have done for forever. And so I think part of it is changing the mindset of families. And I know we've done some of that with the CTE programs of trying to say, hey, there actually is value if they continue on after high school, because look, they've taken all these classes and now they just need one more year and they're certified in something different.
Sure.
And so it's in some ways changing the mindset of the families from they're just going there because they have to this is really going to change the life of my student.
And this is a really mischievous comment that comes out of a conversation I had about financial literacy and how to get messages to the missed generations. It comes from being a mentor in high school and beyond. It's not infrequent for the older sibling to say, the one thing I'm going to do is make sure that my younger sibling doesn't do what I did. And here's the kind of, I'll call it a mischievous comment. Maybe we could ask a question of that group. What did we miss in terms of communicating with your parents earlier in your cycle? That would be another way of possibly getting ideas. But because that's very powerful, and I've seen it quite frequently. Older siblings going back to correct the communication for their younger siblings.
Cool.
Do we have any way to correlate attendance with test scores? I mean, it seems like it would be a really tenuous statistical connection, but you know, it seems like if you're not gonna be around, you're not gonna get the learning that you're then on your kind of standardized testing you're being expected to know. Because I think as you look at how do we measure student outcomes and how do we measure this engagement on that, ultimately we're able to see who shows up and who doesn't. But it's harder to put, I suppose, some of the growth scores maybe, but like that's protected information in terms of this person's attendance went from here to here and their growth score went from here to here.
Oh.
You know, I don't know how you anonymize that enough to make that something usable, but it'd be really nice to actually be able to say, this is the learning outcome that is the goal, and this is how we're able to measure growth or, you know, increase in engagement and tie that to actual learning.
I mean, I think there's a way to do that, especially with, what's that?
Oh, you have to get a tableau.
Well, let's not go there. No.
Wow.
I think there's ways to share that messaging. I mean, even from the classroom-based assessment model to iReady to smarter balanced assessment. I don't think that, I'm not sure what the numbers will tell us though. I don't know if it's a strong enough correlation or if we're getting false positives through that as well. So, but we could definitely take a look at it and see, because I do think there is a correlation when it comes to learning and
Yeah.
growth. It's just what the numbers end up showing us. But that'd be a very interesting action research to participate in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something we're trying to look at this year and in some capacity. And then how are the funds that we're using on it affected as well? Those different components.
I mean, because certainly as you lose things like professional development, that's a long-term effect on the district. That's really hard to say, like, this is the specific thing that we're losing and this is what's going to happen.
Right.
So, how do you get those outcomes, those actual like math scores, actual language scores, and tie them to what's happening?
Anything else?
Question, do we have a part of student orientation, whether it be ninth grade or in the elementary schools, where when you have orientation night, not only is it how does the student get on, but it's what can the parent do? I mean, you probably do. Everything I've said, I'm sure, is being done with huge effort, but that just struck me. That could be a very specific part of orientation. This isn't orientation for the student. It's orientation for the family with instruction for the parents on what's an entitled way for them to get involved.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think that we have bright spots across the district where that's happening. And I know that as Eric and I went around and joined in on parent nights and meet the teacher nights, we saw a couple of examples where that was happening, but not holistically across the board because, well, not because we know that it takes an additional layer of planning to make that happen, but it's something that we need to strive for because yeah, it's very important. And the messaging, the one that we got to hear was at Pioneer Middle School. And when we walked in, did you hear that one as well?
No, but I saw her at the migrant night.
Well, yes, and that was same passion, same level that Jacqueline brought to the migrant night she had in that meeting and it started off, they have the meeting with all sixth grade families. So as a new Pioneer Bear, here's what you need to understand are our expectations. And so it went really well. The other piece that we also see it happening is at conferences. So there are some specific and intentional conversations that are happening around attendance there. Although you may have missed a little bit of an opportunity as well since conferences are at the end of October, but it is intentional. But you're right, Martin, that is a place where we could leverage a captive audience for some time. It's really good.
And I think that's part of why we wanted to have a parent and family engagement component, because we know it's an area we can improve on. And so this year we're really, we'll be doing some professional development, looking at some different programs and data systems across the district, but sort of getting schools' feet wet in addition to what they're already doing. And so that we might develop some more consistency across the district as far as that parent and family communication component and how we get greater engagement, two-way development around that.
I had a thought when Julia was talking about the community culture and changing the community culture, and even from our last community survey to the one that preceding it was security was kind of the number one focus for, what are we looking at? How do we improve in the district? And that bumped to number 2 with CTE being the top of the list for this most recent survey. So, I think there is some of that CTE type education as a value, the value you put on that as opportunities seeping into the parent consciousness. But
and I think we're seeing that, especially as we're working with CTE and training and, all the different components. What do we need to be doing to support our multilingual learners, and so that they have a pathway that's beyond just their traditional pathway? So how do we ensure that that's happening? So I think that makes sense from what we're sort of seeing and hearing as well. And, with the program at the high school now this year, incorporating some of that, how do we support with the language component of it through bilingual funds, through Title III and bilingual, but really providing that opportunity, knowing that it's valuable for our students that might not go more more traditional college route. Yeah.
Excellent, Tim. Thank you very much for bringing not only kind of the learning part for the first half, but then the problem of practice part for the second half, and harvesting all of the things that our board has learned in their time, either on the board or with students in the system, that can help us do our work in the future. So yeah, Tim, we appreciate you being here. And any other questions from the board for Tim at this point? No?
I'm just really glad to see you taking on these difficult challenges.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Got some. And I will.